That's a pretty blistering attack on the Prime Minister's record on immigration, not from his usual foes in UKIP and the likes, but from within parts of his own cabinet, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, dramatically escalating the Tory civil war that was triggered by the referendum campaign. Well, Iain Duncan Smith, their Leave campaign ally and the former Work and Pensions Secretary, joins me now. And a very good morning to you, Mr. Duncan Smith. Your take on this, I mean, presumably you're fully supportive of Mr. Gove and Mr. Johnson in making these points that the Prime Minister shouldn't really have set this target of net migration of tens of thousands if he isn't going to try to keep it.
Well, I think the point they're making here is one that the public themselves are asking, so I think it's fair. They've set a series of questions for him which are straightforward, and they are this. We have a manifesto commitment. We said we would get migration down tens of thousands. How do you expect to do that if we don't control our borders with the European Union? And to control those borders, therefore, we should vote to leave, which would allow us to get our tens of thousands migration figure to where it should be. But it isn't just about migration. The point they're making is migration doesn't just an issue about who's coming in. It hugely affects ordinary people's lives. You know, one of the points I made a couple of weeks ago, which is key, which is, you know, people on low-skilled work, etc., in the UK, according to the Bank of England, have seen their incomes actually fall by up to 10% now as a result of this uncontrolled migration with the European Union. The reason for that is that the majority of the people coming in from the European Union tend to take low-skilled jobs, whereas those coming from outside tend to be high-skilled doctors, nurses, kind of engineers. And so the problem with uncontrolled migration of the EU is it directly affected the incomes of the poorest in society, those who are trying to work. And so that is a big, strong point as to why we set out to control it in the first place.
But what do you think about the tone, the way these views are being expressed? Do you think it is within those parameters of this is reasoned debate and the whole thing can be put back together again after the EU referendum? Because there's some pretty strong language flying around. We've got to add into this Priti Patel saying effectively the Prime Minister's too posh to care about immigration. He's not affected by it.
Well, I think if we just take a pace back from this and see this as it is, I think this is a very important debate. I see that Downing Street was saying, oh, we shouldn't be talking about this, just a distraction from the economy. No, it's not. It's the economy. Immigration is the economy. You can't divide the two of them. So, of course, it's going to be a fierce debate because the truth is, I'm a Democrat. I believe we got elected on a manifesto. I may be old-fashioned, but I believe if you get elected on a manifesto, you should at least be certain that you want to try and make that manifesto work. And that manifesto commitment, at the heart of that, was a commitment to get migration down to tens of thousands. And it's quite clear that everybody believes, actually, the Home Secretary herself came out the other day and said, pretty much, unless we get control over our borders, we're not going to be able to make it to get to this target figure. So what my colleagues are saying today is, A, it's important. How do you intend to do it? Please, can we hear from the Prime Minister how he thinks he's going to do it?
Do you think he is out of touch? Do you think he is too posh to know the real effects of migration?
Well, actually, what Priti was saying, and if you read the article quite rightly, is for most people, it's not really aimed at the Prime Minister or Chancellor particularly. It's actually aimed at, you know, the heads of corporates and these guys that live in rather smart houses here in central London and do rather well for themselves. Immigration isn't an issue for them because, you know, they think it's all right for them because they can get cheaper nannies and stuff like that. What she's saying, though, is the people that I was talking about, people on low and marginal incomes, people living in communities where there's been big dislocation, pressure on schools, pressure on housing, they're the ones that pick up the pieces. And by the way, she's saying, they're also the ones that picked up the pieces when those same big corporates and the forecasters and the economists got it wrong about the crash in 2008. The bankers didn't suffer. The people that suffered were the poorest in society. And that's the key.
But what about the rancour within the party? Will it last?
You know, it's a fierce debate. That doesn't get any more important than who governs your country. So, of course, it's going to be fierce and there's going to be things said and this is the heat of the moment. But if you really ask me, do we think that the next 4 years the Conservative Party will be back and stable and governing? Yeah, I do. Actually, it's worth pointing out...
Do you think the Prime Minister will last 2, 3, 4 years of that?
That's absolutely what I believe and hope he should do, because he'd actually said he wasn't going to stay 4 years anyway, so at some point he's going to step down. But my view about this is, and it's very simple, we're asking the British people a very simple but important question. Do you believe that we had a reformed European Union? In other words, did the Prime Minister get those reforms? Therefore, do you want to stay in that or not? I say there's no reform, so he should vote to leave. If they vote to leave, the Prime Minister's duty and that of the government is to then implement what the British people have decided.
And you want to see him stay and do that? Because we know there are also people, Andrew Bridgen, within the Conservative Party saying even if Remain is the result, particularly if it's by a fairly narrow margin, the Prime Minister's got to go because of the way he has conducted this campaign. Now, that's annoyed you. You've expressed that in the past. You've called the Chancellor Pinocchio and things like that.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yes, well, a lot of people know that when Pinocchio didn't tell things exactly correctly, then the nose grew. Actually, the Treasury Select Committee today said there was a lot of Pinocchio going on inside the government's figures.
But on to that point, are these people who run this campaign, which has annoyed you so much, are they the people to lead your party?
Well, I have a very simple view about this. We were elected a year ago to be a government for 5 years. This debate is not about who governs us, it's in the sense of who's actually in Westminster. It's about who governs us in terms of should it be the public voting for a government in Westminster or the European Union. 60% of our laws are made in the European and we don't control our borders. So voting to leave means we get that power back. And that's the government that they elected a year ago, and that government should then get on and implement that decision. So I think it's very straightforward. I have a simple point I make to my colleagues and everybody else. When you're campaigning, and this is the biggest issue we'll ever campaign on, I have only one interest: winning this campaign.
By whatever means possible.
No, by getting people to recognise the risks of remaining, the crashed euro, the unemployment in Europe, the massive migrancy crisis they've got going on there, the problems of our open borders, migration damaging people's incomes, and us not being in control of our laws. That's all facts and truths, and I would simply say, vote to leave, let's get that done, and let's not worry about what's happening afterwards. Let's vote to leave.
There's a lot around today, but as your other former leader, Sir John Major, saying today by using crass and distorted figures and, in fact, telling downright untruths, he says.
He does say that a lot, doesn't he, really? I do wish he'd read what we say. I mean, I talked about people on the lowest earnings being damaged by migration, uncontrolled migration. That's true. They all came from Bank of England figures and from their own migration advisory council.
That it costs the UK £350 million a week being sent to the EU without mentioning how much they send back.
Yeah, well, let me explain to you how that works. It is accepted by the ONS at 367 million last year that went. And what actually happens is, here's how it works. It'd be like me taking £350 off you and saying, I tell you what, that £350, I'm going to take that away, but here's the deal. I'll give you some of that back, but it won't be for a year.
But Mr. Duncan Smith, that figure...
I'll give you that for a year.
I didn't see the sub-paragraph on the bus. It just says 350 million quid a week.
Because everybody knows that's what goes out.
You get half of it back.
Well, no, you get some, first of all, back, and I give you that a year later, which, by the way, isn't always agreed. You have to negotiate that. And then I give you a bit more, which takes you to about half of that figure, 170 million. But I give you a bit more back, but here's the deal. Now this is your money. I'm going to tell you how you have to spend it. So the rules are my rules about your money. So you don't actually get it back, just here's the cash. You get it back being told what to spend. So I think it's quite reasonable, British public, to say £350 million a week, which is about cost of a hospital a week being built in the UK. That's a lot of money to be a member of this thing, which actually is not working very well at all for anybody.
Just want to pick up on that point. You won't concede the economic argument, this idea that the campaigns have split with Remain on the economy and you on immigration, as you've explained to us a bit earlier. But what about this survey from hundreds of economists today saying, unanimously almost, that there is a danger in Brexit? Now, you really can't deny that you've lost it when that kind of argument is made so strongly.
By the way, I don't see in any of this press release actually how many people didn't even bother to return the survey. They just give us the number that came back, which is fair enough, so no doubt we'll find out. But more importantly, I have a very simple point to make. I do love economists dearly. I do love the way that they always tell you that they know the future. But actually, if I go back, I remember all the same kind of economists telling Mrs. Thatcher she was down, it was all going to crash and burn because she'd never get it right, the economy would never get going, and the economy actually boomed under Mrs. T.
But this is...
Hang on, they were wrong. But this is the same group.
This is a survey.
Hang on, nearly 70% of all economists also told us that if we didn't join the euro, we would be in dire straits and we'd be on the outer margins, and these are the same economists that didn't forecast the Great Recession in 2008. I love economists dearly, but I wish they wouldn't tell us they know the future like the way they do.
I mean, you've used this argument before. If you get your predictions wrong, then we can take whatever you say with a pinch of salt. I mean, what about you and Universal Credit? You've been telling the House of Commons for years, Universal Credit is on course because of the actions I took over a year ago, this is in 2013, to ensure Universal Credit will roll out and deliver exactly as we said it would. As of February this year, there's only 203 100,000 benefit claimants still on it. You're not exactly brilliant at predictions, are you?
No, this is a function. We have actually now rolled universal credit out to every single job centre in the United Kingdom. And as exactly per the plan, then what happens is you now bring in all the other benefits. There are 6 benefits coming into it. That is now starting this month. That rolls out over the next year and a half to 2 years. And the whole reason for this is because we've changed the process. As I said earlier on, gone are the days when a government says, hit the button, the programme goes out, because it always ends up in trouble. What we've said is you do it phase by phase, you check to see you've got it right. We don't want to damage people's lives, we want them to actually do better as a result of UC.
But you're watching from
and that's exactly how it's going.
Last question is, I mean, you're watching from the outside, obviously, as your baby continues, and whether it gets that far or not, you know.
Well, it's already out in every single job centre in the UK.
But what about this issue of a reshuffle post the result, whatever it is? If the Prime Minister offered you a place back in the Cabinet, would you go back, or have you burnt your boats?
I never speculate about the future. I resigned because I had strong feeling that we were moving away from the narrative about social justice and social reform. I wanted us to get back on that. I felt the better way for me to do that is to campaign outside. I'm doing that. I intend to do that again after the referendum is over, so I don't speculate about where I will be. As far as I'm concerned, I will serve my government in the best way that I can, which is for my part.
OK, well, it's not a no, but will you counsel more broadly then the Prime Minister to approach any reshuffle from the point of view of reconciliation rather than revenge?
I never advise Prime Ministers anything, really, because they have to do the job themselves. My view about this is I want to win this referendum more than anything else. If we win this referendum and we leave the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, we'll be better off, be in a stronger position, because I'm passionate about Britain. I think we are the most innovative, most brilliant people on earth, and we should stop telling people that you're not good enough. Britain is good enough to do anything it chooses. As the Prime Minister actually said the other day, of course we'll thrive and prosper. And I say amen to that, because that's what we're voting to leave the European Union for.
Great to see you, Mr. Duncan Smith.
Great.
Thank you very much indeed. Former Work and Pensions Secretary there, Iain Duncan Smith.